Iron Man concluded with a post-credit scene of Nick Fury teasing the Avengers, it was regarded as a very risky move. At the time, the biggest comic fans didn't honestly believe they would see Earth's mightiest heroes on the big screen within a couple of years. And boy were we wrong. But ever since the MCU became the most dominant franchise in cinema, it would seem that every other film is jumping on the bandwagon, teasing the prospect of sequels, prequels, and crossovers. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with the 10 worst sequel baiting moments in recent movies. Number 10. ARTEMIS FOWL. After the success of Harry Potter, Hollywood scrambled to adapt every book series they could find into a motion picture, hoping to strike gold. But even the greatest story can fall apart when it transitions to cinema. The Chronicles of Narnia flopped, the Divergent series remains unfinished, and Percy Jackson tapped out after only 2 movies. But few film adaptations have failed as spectacularly as ARTEMIS FOWL. With visionary director Kenneth Branagh taking the reins of the production, it felt like he would do justice to this classic story. I mean, this is the guy who adapted obscure superhero Thor for the big screen, turning him into an icon. Surely adapting a story about a sinister kid genius battling fairies would be right up his street, right? Wrong. ARTEMIS FOWL was ripped apart for its childish jokes, its weak dialogue, and the pointless changes to the source material. I mean, the fact that the titular character was changed to be more likeable despite being the main villain just goes to show that the filmmakers clearly didn't understand the premise. But considering the failed franchise concludes with Artemis and the gang flying off in a helicopter for their next mission, it was obvious the studio genuinely believed that they had a hit on their hands. Number 9. Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. At its core, Resident Evil is a survivor horror game. And even though that's blatantly obvious, Paul W.S. Anderson never got the memo, since the questionable director's adaptation of Capcom's cherished series were dumb action flicks with less brains than the zombies. So when it was announced that the reboot Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City was set to be an outright horror set in the mansion from the game, fans felt that the franchise might be redeemed. But somehow, Welcome to Raccoon City ruined Resident Evil's name more than Resident Evil 6. Every character acts like an idiot, the dialogue is worse than the source material, somehow, the scares never work, and the fan service is forced, except the itchy tasty bit. Kudos for that. This reboot is so badly put together that you might actually find yourself defending Paul W.S. Anderson's version after all. But judging by the end credits scene, it would seem that the studio had high hopes for it. In the scene, we see Albert Wesker, the game's big bad, don his iconic sunglasses as he teams up with fan favourite Ada Wong. Even though this moment hints that there's more to come, viewers could tell within minutes of watching Welcome to Raccoon City that it never stood a chance at creating a franchise. Number 8. Gem and the Holograms. Being a Hasbro-based property, the animated series Gem was clearly made to sell toys, but then again, what cartoon made in the 80s wasn't? Gem centres around a musician and her band going on adventures across the globe while battling rival music gangs. Even though the show could have been a soulless cash grab, Gem had a lot of heart, catchy tunes, and wonderful animation. So when a film adaptation called Gem and the Holograms was announced, fans were beyond excited. But not only was the movie obliterated by critics, it only made a measly $2 million worldwide. Nevertheless, somebody overseeing the project was so certain Gem and the Holograms would be a success, a teaser for a follow-up was inserted in the mid-credits. In the scene, the evil music producer Erica, fresh from losing her job, stumbles into an alleyway where she meets the band leader of the Misfits. Because the Misfits served as the recurring villain of the original show, this scene implied the band would be the main antagonists for the sequel. But considering that most Gem fans didn't even know that this abomination existed, the likeliness of a sequel seeing the light of day is basically non-existent. Number 7. Robin Hood. There are few tales told more than that of Robin Hood. And because practically everyone is familiar with the story of the vigilante from Locksley who steals from the rich to give to the poor, it's actually quite surprising that a big-time studio hasn't swooped in and tried to make this into a franchise sooner. But in 2018, Hollywood gave it a shot. Hot off the success of Kingsman, which we'll get to later in this list, Taron Egerton was cast as the fabled archer in Otto Bathurst's Robin Hood. Even though the action-packed blockbuster concluded with Robin defeating the Sheriff of Nottingham, the final scene shows the bombastic Bowman challenging the new sheriff, teasing their rivalry in a future storyline. Sadly, or thankfully, depending on how you want to look at it, the sequel never came into fruition due to the film's lack of creative personality or visual distinction, and therefore it kind of just came across as derivative schlock. Because it tries to put a modern spin on a medieval folktale, it feels like a clone of 2017's King Arthur Legend of the Sword, which also attempted and failed to create a franchise. Number 6. ALITA Battle Angel. ALITA Battle Angel centers around a recently reactivated android who wakes up in the distant future. After she learns a mysterious sky city called Zalem has caused the world to fall into ruin, our enormously eyed heroine does all she can to bring peace to society. Now, being 16 years in the making, you would have expected this manga adaptation to have been a masterpiece, but unfortunately ALITA failed to win over critics and barely made a profit. Although ALITA has its defenders, we can all agree that the last scene was a bit cringe. As the titular robot points her sword defiantly towards Zalem in the closing moments, we see the city's founder Nova gazing down at the city. At first, you can't see Nova's face properly due to the goofy visor he's wearing, but as he pulls his spectacles off, it's revealed that Nova is played by Edward Norton. Despite the fact this is supposed to be a profound moment, this glorified cameo doesn't add anything to the story, and feels like it was inserted just so viewers could go, oh, it's Edward Norton. Now at this moment in time, the jury is still out as to whether a sequel is in the works. But whatever the verdict, it was a dumb idea to end the film with a 3-time Oscar-nominated actor sneering into the camera while wearing a silly wig. Number 5. The Predator. How do you get the guy behind Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys and Iron Man 3 to make a Predator sequel and still screw it up? I mean, it sounds impossible, and yet the powers that be found a way. Make no mistake, Shane Black, who played Hawkins in the first Predator, has a gift for witty banter, creative action and subverting expectations. As a result, it seemed like 2018's Predator could recapture what made the original so special. But instead, we got the worst entry in the franchise. Not including the Alien crossovers, of course, but those films are in a league of their own. Even though The Predator boasts a strong cast, it's not enough when the script is this abominable. I mean, who thought a Predator sequel needed a magical kid in the plot and a message about climate change? And because this film was reshot at the last minute due to a poor screen test, it does make one wonder how awful the first cut must have been. But since the final scene shows our hero donning the alien suit to fight the Predators, it was obvious the filmmakers hoped a sequel would be greenlit. Fortunately, the studio had enough sense to scrap the follow-up. Number 4. Moonfall. Roland Emmerich recently affirmed that he won't be fanboying over Marvel anytime soon. Which is ironic, considering he can't stop imitating the MCU's habit of hinting at sequels. He had Godzilla conclude with a to be continued. Independence Day Resurgence ended with such unsubtle sequel bait, the cast might as well have just stared at the camera shouting, "There's gonna be another one!" even though there wasn't. And sadly, Emmerich doesn't seem to have learned from his mistakes, as he did intend for his most recent work Moonfall to launch a franchise. In the climax, conspiracy theorist Houseman destroys whatever the hell the villain is, sacrificing himself in the process. But in the final scene, we learn the Moon created a copy of Houseman. I know, it doesn't really make sense, just go with it. The Moon's creator looks at Houseman eagerly, telling him they must get to work to prepare for a greater threat looming on the horizon. Now, although Emmerich did intend to shoot 2 sequels back to back, this idea was quickly dashed when it made a pitiful $57 million in the box office. And considering that this is the least successful mainstream movie that Emmerich has ever directed, I think it's safe to say that Moonfall 2 isn't happening. Number 3. The King's Man. The third entry into Matthew Vaughn's Kingsman series takes place during World War I and focuses on the creation of Britain's biggest spy agency. Despite some great action and Rhys Ifans' scene-chewing performance as Rasputin, there's nothing in The King's Man that blew audiences away like the original. The prequel also feels so disconnected from the overarching plot of the franchise, it would have worked better if it was a standalone. Nevertheless, Vaughn seemed confident in its success, which is is why The King's Man concludes with a big fat sequel tease. Although the British spies seemingly destroyed the flock in the climax, the mid-credits scene reveals that one survivor, Hannesson, has taken charge of the organisation. Preparing to destroy the Kingsman, Hannesson meets his new ally, a young Austrian soldier called Adolf Hitler. Now, although the filmmakers clearly expected this reveal to leave jaws on the floor, it kind of just felt really forced and seemed a little bit like it was put in just for a laugh. Now, whether you enjoyed this mid-credits sequence or not, it doesn't seem to have any lasting effects, considering that the film barely broke even, and as a result, it's highly likely that Vaughn will probably abandon the prequel series and probably put more focus back into the modern franchise. Number 2, Morbius. Sony's most recent attempts to continue their Spider-Man-less cinematic universe was such a bomb both financially and critically, it's not even funny. Well, okay, maybe it is a little bit funny, especially some of the memes that Morbius has inspired. Thanks to Morbius's underwhelming effects, incoherent plot, and rote performances, this vampire anti-hero flick didn't win anyone over. Also, why did Morbius have a dance number? Did Sony learn anything from Spider-Man 3? But the one element of Morbius that received the most scrutiny is the post-credits scene. In the scene in question, Michael Keaton's character Adrian Toomes is transported to Morbius's universe due to the events which occurred in Spider-Man No Way Home. After Toomes inexplicably acquires his Vulture outfit, he meets Morbius, unsubtly name-drops Spider-Man, and teases the Sinister Six showing up in a future project. Even though the producers thought that this would get viewers psyched, all it really did was confirm how unstructured this cinematic universe really is. And it also feels a little bit like Sony are so unconfident in their own work that they're just clinging to their connections to the MCU in order to keep viewers interested. Although Jared Leto would like to see Morbius turning up in Blade, I wouldn't hold my breath. Number 1, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Snyder fans hyped Zack's Justice League up so much that it seemed almost inconceivable that this director's cut could live up to the expectations. But for the most part, the second version of Justice League, which is technically the first, knocked it out of the park. The characterization of Cyborg and Flash were significantly better. Steppenwolf was reshaped into a compelling villain, and Superman's CGI lip was nowhere to be seen. So, when one of the closing scenes depicts Supes pulling off his shirt to reveal the S symbol on his suit, it felt like the perfect moment to end the movie. Although that is how Justice League was meant to conclude, there was a change of plan in the 11th hour. Even though the film that Zack envisioned was done back in 2017, the acclaimed director decided to tack on 3 scenes at the end, which teased Ben Affleck's Batman film Darkseid and Martian Manhunter. But since the Batman film was axed and the other characters appeared earlier, these 3 scenes added absolutely nothing to the story. Now, when Zack Snyder's Justice League was released in 2021, Warner Brothers made it crystal clear that they had no intention of creating a sequel to this story. So it does make you question why Snyder decided to include these extra scenes when there was going to be no payoff for them. And that concludes our list. If you can think of any that we missed, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.